In China, we have an old saying, home is the place your soul yearns for, no matter how far you roam. This is a story about what happens when that yearning brings someone back from the dead. In the 36th year of the Republic of China, around 1947, in a small city called Changping, there lived an elderly midwife named Granny Wang. Her only son, A Bing, had been conscripted into the army half a year earlier. Like countless Chinese families during the Civil War, she lived alone in a rundown house on the outskirts of town, clinging to faint hope. One stormy midnight, a frantic knock shattered the silence. A stranger begged her to come quickly. His neighbor's wife was in labor, and something was wrong. Without hesitation, Granny Wang grabbed her tools and followed the man deep into the countryside, to a lonely house surrounded by rows of Chinese scholar trees, Huai Shu, which in folklore are often associated with spirits and the underworld. Inside, a young woman was suffering a difficult labor, completely alone. Her baby was in the wrong position. Granny Wang tried every method she knew, but in the end, both mother and child died. It was a painful, helpless death, one that left the midwife shaken. The man who had summoned her sighed. Her husband was taken for the army, just like your son. No one to care for her. She was already anxious and malnourished. And this was the result. Granny Wang's heart ached. She buried the woman with the help of the stranger, then returned home. Her grief doubled by the reminder of her own missing child. A few nights later, another frantic knock. A man outside cried out. His wife was going into labor. Again, Granny Wang set out into the darkness with her tools, but as they walked, something felt wrong. The man moved too fast, too lightly, as if his feet weren't touching the ground. And then she saw the house, the same solitary home, among the same rows of scholar trees. The same woman, who she had just buried, lay in bed, now again in labor. Granny Wang said nothing. Her hands shook, but her training took over. She delivered the baby, a boy. He wailed, strong and loud. The man cheered. She bathed the baby and the mother with hot water, took the silver coin he offered, and left quickly. It wasn't until daylight that her mind could even begin to process what she had just witnessed. For days, Granny Wang was too shaken to leave her home, but the thought kept eating at her. That soldier who had returned, he must have known A Bing. Perhaps he could tell her something, anything about her son. She gathered her courage and returned to the haunted house. This time, the woman, very much alive, answered the door, holding the same infant. But something was off. The baby's face was bloated and purple, a sign of suffocation during childbirth. Before Granny Wang could speak, the woman bowed deeply and said, "Thank you for keeping our secret." She confessed. She and her husband had returned from war, only to find her body still warm from death. She couldn't bear to shatter his joy or add to his trauma. So she pretended to still be alive, long enough for him to see his son born. "I just wanted to protect him," she said. "Please, keep this secret a little longer." Granny Wang left, stunned, but agreed. Halfway home, she heard someone calling her name. It was the man. He floated toward her, feet never touching the ground. "I know you'd come looking for me," he said softly. "But please don't tell her the truth yet. She still thinks I'm alive. I died 2 weeks ago on the battlefield." Granny Wang gasped. "Then why did you come back?" He smiled. "To make sure they were safe. To see my wife and child just once more, before I move on." She whispered, "But how did you know where I live?" He answered, "A Bing told me. We were like brothers." Granny Wang's eyes widened. "You saw A Bing? Is he still alive?" The ghost smiled. "Yes, he's alive." Tears welled in her eyes. She ran back, faster than ever, and there, in front of her home, stood a tall young man. "Mom!" he cried. It was A Bing. They embraced. She sobbed in his arms. "You're home. You're really home." But as she held him, she realized he was weightless, and his feet floated just above the ground. Granny Wang froze, but then smiled through her tears. She looked up and said, "It's okay. Home is home, even if you had to cross from the other side to get here.